Hello again. Insurance group Sanlam is stepping up to protect biodiversity in Africa. The group says it will adopt the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures recommendations. These recommendations are a key milestone in the relationship between nature, business and financial capital. The group believes that Africa's biodiversity assets are an integral part of delivering financial prosperity for future generations. Well, let's discuss this more now with Abel Sakhau. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Sanlam. Abel, welcome to today and thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, just tell our viewers, what are these nature-related financial disclosures?
Thanks, Paten, and the viewers. In layman's terms, nature-related financial disclosures are recommendations and disclosures that we integrate into our business decision-making process, whereby every activity that we do from a Sanlam perspective, whether is it in insurance or is it in investment, we'll seek to integrate processes that protects biodiversity rather than destroy it.
Yeah, but this task force is a global task force.
Absolutely.
So if you're in business anywhere in the world, whether you're Sanlam or wherever you are, you would do well by doing this. But not everybody's adopting it, and you at Sanlam have decided to adopt this now. Why?
It's important. You know, the business of Sanlam is promising a future with financial confidence. And we realize that we cannot just promise that future if that future is going to come with a global system or a global nature that is destroyed in terms of biodiversity. So it's important that when we do these disclosures in our business, we make sure that we integrate this, and the promise that we give to the future is a promise that will be able to sustain life on Earth from a nature perspective.
In a layperson's term, just explain to our viewers, what are these recommendations? I understand there's about 14 of them.
Yeah. So
what's the key aspect of these recommendations?
I think central to this recommendation is that we realize that, when you do any investment or any underwriting, there is that impact that we do from a biodiversity perspective or from a nature perspective. So what these recommendations are saying to us, before you make that decision, that investment decision or that underwriting decision from an insurance perspective, please make sure that the activities that you engage in, those activities are not going to lead to the destructions of biodiversity or nature assets wherever you are doing business.
Okay, now how vulnerable is our country in terms of nature-related risks?
Absolutely, it's very vulnerable. So if you look at, climate change compounds even the issue of our vulnerability. South Africa is quite a challenge because we are a water-scarce country. So if we are not protecting, for example, the wetlands, which wetlands help us to, they help in terms of purifying water. They help in terms of water storage. So if we neglect protecting such simple things as wetlands, we're going to run into challenges with the exacerbation of climate change because it's just going to make the situation even more. But most importantly also is that we also borrow from nature. People think nature is there for us to take whatever we want. We borrow from nature and we expect nature to regenerate itself and come back again with the same amount of production. But climate change then says to us, you're not going to have that in future if you're not going to have a different approach in the way you interact with nature.
So at the core of these recommendations, this task force on nature-related financial disclosures, which is a global thing, lies that understanding that the economies are intricately intertwined with nature, and we need to understand that rather than being separate. We are not in a silo here, so to speak. So what are the main challenges in this relationship? You've just mentioned us, we're not looking after our water resources, for example, here in the country, and we are a water-scarce country.
Absolutely.
But what other challenges exist?
I think awareness. Awareness is the biggest challenge that we have, because if you are not aware of the impact that you create on nature, you will continue behaving the same way you are. But now, with us adopting this, we operate over 30 countries in Africa. You can imagine the influence that we can have in just creating that awareness. Whether it's through our clients or through our stakeholders to say, now we are going to assess you on the basis of your performance against nature-related impacts.
What kind of questions are you going to ask in that assessment? I mean, are you going to ask, let's say you've got an office in Nairobi, for example, are you going to ask, what are you doing to protect the elephants? I'm just asking. I mean, what are you doing what are the questions that you are likely to be asking in making sure that your business, for example, and your clients, as you've said, adhere to the TNFD?
Yeah. So it's not even only about just asking the questions. It's also about the engagement process. Because, for example, let me give you a classic example where if, we do invest in a mining company, by its nature, mining is extractive. That means mining will take some form of biodiversity for it to be able
and in the process, it might be polluting as well.
Yes, in a pool. So for us, we then have a responsibility to make sure that that particular activity is done in accordance to the country legislation and is in compliance. But we then say compliance is not enough, given that we have huge issues in terms of climate change. We've got communities that also depends on nature assets. To say to those companies, what else are you doing? Can we partner together to make sure that we can enhance nature and biodiversity in areas where we operate? Because it's not about excluding certain people. And to prove our commitment, in June we partnered with the South African National Parks Authority.
This year?
Yes, okay. This year. To give communities that exist and operate within the parks ability to do business with the Parks Authority to make sure that those communities also have an interest in protecting the biodiversity that sits within our parks. Because we know our parks generate enough financial returns for the country in terms of GDP from a tourism perspective. But those communities, if they are not integral part of management of the parks, then you are going to get into a situation where communities are not going to protect the park.
Yes, you might need them to help you catch the rhino poachers.
Absolutely.
But because they are not feeling engaged or part of, it's not. I mean, it's very interesting you mentioning this, because I was just beginning to think, where can we stand to gain in this? I mean, your business, for example, it could be clear. And why do you think everybody should adopt these recommendations? You are doing it already, Sanlam, but why would you think everybody should?
Everyone is reliant on biodiversity and nature. The air we breathe, clean air. We need clean air. So you can then not stand on the fence line and say, I'm still deciding. When on every single day, whether you are running a small business or a large conglomerate, your business is dependent on nature services. Then to say, come, let's partner together. Let's make sure that the future generations who are going to inherit this world from us, they will be able to go and enjoy the same quality of biodiversity that we have today, because the decisions that we make for protecting it and enhancing it will then benefit those future generations. Otherwise, why are we selling a promise to the future? Do
you have to land your message that you've just expressed now differently? Let's talk about our country. We have load shedding. Somebody says, my business, I can't get electricity enough. And the cost of living crisis. Now you're telling me about future and biodiversity. How do you then make sure that the messaging creates the awareness that is required to protect our future?
For us, it's even important because if you look at South Africa, how we use our biodiversity. I've spoken about tourism.
And we're blessed, eh?
And we are blessed. And you look at, our cultural processes or your traditional processes where some people and some part of the communities will rely on, the plants that we have for medicinal purposes. So is that partnership to say we can also use that, because those are the people that have to carry the message to say, if you destroy biodiversity, you are actually destroying our livelihoods. In schools, we partnered with the Department of Education for Early Childhood Development. It's those kind of relationships that, you have to catch awareness at an early age. I grew up in a school where we used to have Zibi, collecting paper and getting taught how to manage your environment. It's those things to say, how then do you embed that behavior at an early stage?
Okay, finally, very briefly, in the last half a minute we have, Abel, what's next in the adopting, in this, you as Sanlam adopting the task force on nature-related financial disclosures?
Yes, now that we've adopted it, we're going to go back and look at our business within that framework of the recommendations and try to integrate every aspect of our activities to say how then do we enhance the protection of biodiversity and nature.
And you'll be able to measure this over time.
We have to. Otherwise, then there's no point of doing it.
Thank you very much. That's Abel Sakhau, Chief Sustainability Officer of one of South Africa's largest insurance groups, Sanlam. Now, South Africans are donning their green and